The DA has slammed State Security, or Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, who would also be overseeing issues related to state security within that portfolio's trip to Russia for a high-level meeting on international security matters. The party has described the move as a diplomatic blunder, which could cost South Africa dearly. Let's talk now to DA Member of Parliament Dianne Kohler Barnard, who's joining us. A very good evening to you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Why do you believe this is such a massive diplomatic blunder?
Well, I am on the JSCI, the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence, and that she's a brand new minister. She's been in the job a few minutes. There have been, I think, 7 ministers before her. It's called the revolving door diplomatic in and out system. They literally last maybe a year if they're lucky, and out they go. So she's brand new. For her to announce, number one, on social media that she's going there to discuss security matters was extraordinary, considering the catastrophe that they've just been through. And in her budget speech on Friday last week, she made much of this wonderful relationship South Africa had with the U.S. I was quite astounded at it, considering their reaction to the ambassador's pronouncements, and referred to them as our biggest trading partner. So she was obviously told to make good and make nice with them. But the timing of this meeting, immediately after that, comes the announcement that she's off to have this meeting, is highly concerning. And it does raise very serious questions about the government's so-called commitment to responsible diplomacy, national security, non-alignment in terms of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's quite extraordinary that she would have announced to the whole world that she was going to do this, number one. She must have known there'd be a backlash, and here she goes. So I really found it absolutely extraordinary and naive in the extreme.
But is it all that surprising, though, when you consider that even when Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, was in South Africa, the International Relations Minister, Naledi Pandor, said in his presence that South Africa would not be bullied on the issue of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They still insist, government, that the non-alignment policy is one that stands and that there's no record, for instance, that weapons were sold by this country to the Russians and left on that vessel in December last year. The Americans, in response, have welcomed South Africa's commitment to an investigation into the allegations around the weapons. So it appears for now the relationship is holding just fine.
Well, that may well be. Let me just say this. No ambassador in the world is going to make a statement like that unless they are 110% sure of their facts. So I really question the denialist bluster of the ANC after those claims, and of course await the outcome of the investigation into the matter of what was a Wagner Group registered cargo ship which turned off its transponder shortly after leaving Luanda, and then of course it's claimed it docked in Simonstown, where truck-borne cranes had been brought in to load and offload the cargo. The containers being transported to and from the ship were, it's claimed, all registered to the SANDF, and the ship then returned to Russia. Civilians were guarding it. They were carrying SANDF weapons, and they threatened locals who attempted to photograph what was going on. So, South Africa does indeed have weapons and ammo common to Russia, despite the claims to the contrary, and these would include AK-47s, 155mm artillery and shells, and frequency-hopping radios, amongst other things. So something very strange went on there, and if that is the general belief, and in light of the sanctions against Russia, global sanctions in terms of what they claim to be war crimes, I think one should be tiptoeing into this relationship, not broadcasting it as they have been.
Is it possible, though, that those weapons, if indeed weapons were picked up from South Africa destined for Russia, would have come from another source other than the military or the South African government? Is that possible?
Of course it's possible, and that's hopefully what the investigation will show. But indeed, if, as you just said, it was bound for Russia, arms came through this country with this country's knowledge, or from this country, I think the end result is exactly the same. So either we are allowing ourselves to be used as a conduit, or we are supplying them. Those are the two options that I can see.
Right.
So, yes, it's a huge issue, and of course it needs a full investigation, and let's hope that the person who runs the investigation, which may, of course, run on for years, as they tend to do, does the job to the nth degree.
So on the visit then by Minister Ntshavheni, it's a trip that we're told will see the discussion with Russian officials around global security trends, food security as well. That, I would imagine, will likely touch on the grain deal. We know the movement of grain had been a massive deal because some of that grain is meant to go to other African countries that are dependent on the resource from Ukraine. Do you, as the DA, believe that there's absolutely no good that could come from this, no benefit, no learning that South Africa and the broader continent could perhaps gain?
Look, I think this continent can always learn. Any continent should and could always learn from various instances and various events, global events. But we don't want to find ourselves on the wrong side of history. And everything about the invasion of a sovereign nation should have one's hackles rising. It certainly has mine. I mean, if Mozambique invaded South Africa, what do you think the world would be saying? If another country invaded, I don't know, think of a South American country, one invaded the other, the world would be outraged. And they are outraged at what has happened now. And other countries such as Poland and others are also feeling extremely threatened, because they're one border over now. And so it's not something that one wants to play easily with.
Right.
It should have been approached in a far more measured manner than it has been. We can't be the polecats of the world here, backing someone against whom there are an enormous number of charges now.
It's interesting, though, that the Ukrainians don't seem to have taken too much exception or made too much, shall we say, or, yes, reacted, shall we say, in a more serious manner to the allegations against South Africa, because in that same week, President Ramaphosa held a phone conversation with Vladimir Putin of Russia. Then he spoke to Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine the very next day, and Zelensky then expressed openly that, they urge South Africa to advocate for peace. There's going to be now this team of African nations, including South Africa itself, which will now try to play a role in bringing about an end to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Given that context and the Ukrainian posture to South Africa's stance, is it worth giving these interventions from our side a chance and perhaps see if this trip will not lead to something positive to that effect?
Well, I don't think we can see the Minister of State Security's visit there as part of this process. There doesn't seem to be any indication that it is. But to see African nations attempting to play the peacemaker in terms of Northern Hemisphere invasions is quite an extraordinary move. If something can come of it, that's wonderful. But on the whole, Ukraine is very well aware of the ANC government's stance and the support that they've given Russia, and jumping on many a strange bandwagon in relation to the invasion. And I'm very glad you actually call it the invasion, because in Parliament it's called the Russia-Ukraine conflict. No ANC person ever refers to it as an invasion of a sovereign nation, which is how the DA sees it. So we'll sit and watch. Certainly, if something could come of it, that's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But if the urging from South Africa, the South African side, is that Ukraine must give up certain amounts of its land to Russia in order to stop the invasion, I don't see that achieving what perhaps is they're wanting to achieve.
Just on that, thank you very much, Dianne Kohler Barnard from the DA.